Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Okay, we are finally here. My apologies for the late start tonight. Technical problems, a little bit of a problem with some cyber attacks over the past couple of weeks here, and they kind of just overwhelmed things here as we tried to get on the air at our regular time of 7 p.m. Eastern. Had to just take care of some of the problems, and we did that, and here we are. An hour late, but better late than never. And here tonight to join me in this special broadcast is Joseph Lenard, direct from Detroit.
Hello. Yeah, I would think Putin probably would say better never than late, but...
Well, particularly maybe tonight. I'm not sure if what we're going to have to say would make him smile very much, but we'll see. Yeah. We always try to be fair and balanced here, but that is the subject du jour, the decision by Biden to give Ukraine clearance to use U.S. Missiles, ATACMS, inside Russia to hit military, and we should be specific about that, military targets. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, well, define military target for one, but before we get to that, the most important thing, the Blue Bombers owe me money.
The Blue Bombers? Why did you...
They cost me money. Take up a collection. I'll take loonies and toonies, but you owe me some money. The only thing gray about the Grey Cup was the lame play of Winnipeg. See what I did there?
Well, even though you're from Detroit, I'm glad you're still kind of tuned into what's going on up here in the Great White North. And on that note, we'll take a little break, and when we come back, we'll dig into this story that has some people flipping out, worried about World War III.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV,
the entire world is watching.
On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
He's a fighter. He's a survivor. President Trump, defiant, strong. He is determined to make America great again. Pay tribute to the 45th President of the United States with this collectible t-shirt from the Maverick News Memorable Moments collection. Even a would-be assassin's bullet could not stop him. Instead, he emerged with his fist in the air ready to fight. For freedom. Get your Trump Fighting for Freedom t-shirt with any donation of $30 or more to Maverick News. There are 2 iconic artistic designs to choose from. But there is only one way to get these. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Support free speech. Free media. Support Maverick News. Call 1-866-248-1490 or order online at supergeeks.tv.
Okay, we're back.
They didn't do it at the Grey Cup the other day, but did you see the Detroit Lions and I think Seattle, couple of different NFL teams? And when asked why, they said, well, they're not going to be available for press after the game now. But one said afterwards he's seen somebody at UFC do it, so hey, it's okay now.
What are you talking about?
The Trump dance.
The Trump dance. Oh, the Trump dance. Okay. I wondered, man, like you were like, what the heck is he talking about?
Out of the Trump commercial, so I figured,
Gotcha. Okay, now I understand. The Trump dance.
You know how my brain segues.
Yeah, well, that it's logical. It makes sense. I get it. I like the Trump dance. I think that it's cool.
It's fashionable now. Yeah, it's like you wouldn't have had it 4 years ago, but now, now people are saying I wouldn't call it a landslide victory, but it's clearly a red wave and a mandate victory.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We're not talking Reagan 84, but it's a mandate victory. Almost every blue state went 10 or 20 points to the right.
Yes.
I mean, Trump didn't turn New York or California red, but he moved it that direction a lot.
He sure did. Yeah. As I've said, I think your analysis there is quite accurate, because if he won in terms of electoral college and state by state overall, yeah, he won. But if you look at like the popular vote, it's still a very divided country. Mm-hmm. It's each state he wins, but
won a popular vote first time since in almost forever too. Right. And the same, if not after the 2020 census, the last 4 years, the left, through ballot initiatives, Soros money and whatnot, like in Michigan, a prop to put redistricting in the hands of a committee, which of course the left then controlled, gerrymandered most of the House, beneficial to them. We should have won another dozen House seats this election. I mean, a lot of them were that close.
Yeah,
it should have been even more of a red wave, but they gerrymandered it. And
yeah, but if you look at the way the country is right now, I think it would be a mistake for the Republicans, the MAGA Republicans, whatever that party is now, to think that they just have this, overwhelming majority of people on their side. It's still the country's just still very divided. It's a fragile
coalition.
Yeah, it is. It is a fragile coalition, and I think the mandate is fragile as well. So between now and the next election, everything could really shift and change
Whoever holds
again.
The White House, midterms usually loses congressional seats.
Yeah.
But, and again, with the way they have them gerrymandered, it's really indeed going to favor them. But depending on what happens over the next 2 years, if MAGA can get even just a trickle like 2022 was, it would be great. But I got us off track already. That's not
okay.
what we're here to talk about.
The big question is, will we be around and still alive to worry about that in a couple of years, or are we going to
be living a nuclear winter?
Yes, I just don't know. I shouldn't be laughing. It is a pretty serious situation, and I've been listening to people on all sides over the past couple of days, taking it all in. I have my views, What's your initial reaction to this decision by Joe Biden to allow the use of ATACMS missiles to hit military targets inside Russia?
Well, I think the first thing is history. How did we get here? And you got to go back to Clinton, that people still do not know and understand. We're here today because of Bill Clinton and some dumb Ukrainians, as I've said in the past. So smart people study the art of war by Sun Tzu. Stupid people study the art of stupid by Sun Byrne. And that was both Clinton and some Ukrainians, convincing them to give up the nukes as the Soviets fled from, and Putin and the others didn't want those nukes that were there pointed at Moscow. Well, that's what would have kept Ukraine safe. So idiot Clinton dangled sure NATO acceptance to the Ukrainians, and if not on paper, exact signatories to NATO treaty would be NATO protectorate, even off paper. So that's why we're here where we are, right? Because then Obama...
And Ukraine had the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons at that time. Third largest.
They'd be an intact sovereign nation still today if they did not let idiot Clinton talk them out of them. And Obama is the guy who then said, I don't care what Bill Clinton did. Let them have it. And indeed, they rolled into Crimea. And then, of course, Trump came in. And Trump, despite all the talk about, he's an isolationist, he's not. He gave them lots of weapons to try to prevent expansion of that war. And it worked through his whole term. And, of course, Joe Biden comes along and Putin sees weaknesses again, and then indeed expands the war into other parts of Ukraine, which is what got us today. And indeed, then Biden honored the Clinton agreement and started giving a whole lot more. We wouldn't have had to given if they wouldn't have been dumb enough to give up their nukes in the first place, but they did. Wouldn't have had to if Obama wouldn't have been so weak and started this whole downhill landslide.
Yeah, and when they gave those nukes up, that led to the Budapest Memorandum, which was a guarantee by the UK, Russia, and the United States that Ukraine's borders would be respected and protected. And now it's like a betrayal, really, of all sides in various ways to Ukraine, because first of all, Russia just basically tore that up. Putin tore it up, ignored
Russia
it.
Honored anything? They don't. They never honored the START treaty and everything. I think anyone who thought Russia would not eventually renege on that, I'm sorry, complete moron.
Yeah. So, and then I don't, in my opinion, it has been kind of typical of the way the U.S. handles wars, which is to say that they gave aid, but not enough. And so the whole thing kind of just goes on and on instead of being really decisive. And that's because the Biden administration has largely been, and, administrations before that, Democrats in particular, timid, afraid of Putin and what he might do. So they've really had, whether people care to acknowledge it or not, the Biden administration in particular, policy or an approach to this that has been reactionary, not escalatory. So whenever Russia does something, then they use that as justification to respond with something that, takes it up to the next notch with Russia, and then again and again. But it hasn't really been the U.S. and NATO at any step with Biden in the White House, really escalating. It's always been reactionary because they have been afraid that they're just afraid that they're going to trigger a nuclear war because Putin sits there and keeps threatening to use them. He keeps threatening to use nuclear weapons.
And it's a return to the domino theory idiocy, almost Neville Chamberlainism, of appeasement. Just put them in check. Don't fight to win. Just keep them in check. And that's a sure way to lose.
Yes.
Not trying to win, which brings us again where we are today. Now, finally giving them the go-ahead. And as I said to you when we talked on the phone this afternoon, who the hell are we to give or withhold permission for weapons we give them? It's their territory. It's their land. Once we give it to them, it's theirs. They should go forth with the art of war as opposed to Biden's the art of stupid. And full circle to the top, what's a military target? They're striking Ukrainian grid. Their electrical grid is game. Fuel depots, open game, legitimate military target. Yeah. And if the Russian people start to feel it as a side effect of that, well, hey, that's bonus. Because they need to wake up. Because apparently the 100,000 plus body bags, to the point that they need to bring in 30K NOCO troops now to make up for all of his losses. The people need to be made to feel it, so they put pressure on. That's what's really going to drive Putin to the negotiation table. And they've attacked Kyiv, so I'm sorry. Moscow, fair game.
You know what? This is what is blowing my mind, Joseph. The way people here are being bombarded with, I would say, propaganda. It's affecting the way they're viewing this. Just look, if you have country X and country Y, and country X fires missiles, country X fires missiles at country Y, and your country Y, what would you do? If I would fire missiles back at country X. But what we're being told is that, in this case, country X, being Russia, is allowed to fire missiles at country Y, being Ukraine, but Ukraine's not allowed to fire missiles back at country X.
Well,
it's like you're not allowed. Now, you can, if they come into your country, you can fight inside Ukraine, but you're not allowed to fire back at the. It's like they get to punch you in the face as many times as you want, but all you can do is, I don't know, like kick him in the shin.
Right. Ukraine is not supposed to bother to fully strike back, just like the handcuffs on Israel. Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, out of Syria, out of not Yemen, but Yemen, right?
Yeah.
The Houthis, right?
That's right.
But they're supposed to not strike back. No, peace through strength. If they know you're handcuffed, they can punch on you all doggone day long. Yeah. But the minute you show, you hit us, right? The old saying, they bring a knife, you bring a gun, right? They put one of yours in the morgue, you put 10 of theirs in the morgue.
Remember you remember the attack? We talked about it on this program. The attack on the Sevastopol beach, where the Russians were flipping out and making a big deal out of the use of cluster munitions.
Which it wasn't.
No, which I don't think it was either. When you really look back at it, it wasn't at all. But
we struck their missile batteries. It's like Hamas and Hezbollah hiding in hospitals. They put them on the beach with beachgoers.
So it's
human shields.
This is the thing I've kind of just had it up to here with the Russian BS, because they were like, the U.S. is guilty of a war crime because they used cluster munitions in Sevastopol. Well, overnight, the Russians launched another massive attack on Ukraine using what else? Cluster munitions. That's what they did. And they hit civilian targets. They hit apartment buildings. I think that the number of civilians killed is somewhere around over a dozen. A dozen?
Yeah.
innocent civilians killed with cluster munitions that the Russians were flipping out about, saying that the U.S. was guilty of a war crime. And then RFK Jr. picked up on the Russian propaganda himself and accused his own country of committing a war crime when it was clearly a bunch of propaganda at the time. It's just, it blows my mind. And now today, these people who are like, they're really just, their minds are twisted around. Nobody's coming out saying, well, the Russians used cluster munitions overnight, and even the UN has condemned the use of cluster munitions and blah, blah, blah. You don't hear any criticism at all of what the Russians have done. Nothing at all. But that's what they did overnight in response to a lot of this. They've been escalating, ramping things up since the election of Donald Trump.
I wrote down collateral damage so I wouldn't forget, right? There's always, when civilian lives are lost, it's always bad. There's always going to be some mishap.
On either side.
Right, collateral damage. But the degree of it going on in Ukraine is way beyond coincidence and collateral damage. They are purposefully, willfully, malice aforethought attacking civilian targets. You will not convince me otherwise. Just like, again, Hamas hides under a hospital begging for that hospital to be bombed, and then they go to the world because there are stooges who will repeat the propaganda. Oh, look what the Jews did. They killed some kids. You were using them as human shields. That hospital, unfortunately, even after they drop leaflets to tell you to clear the hospital, it's now a legitimate military target. You didn't clear it. Hamas made sure they weren't able to clear it, and it gets leveled. Oh, my God, look what they did. It was them using them as human shields that caused the situation.
Well, just a few nights ago, I ran, it was like some recent Google Street Views inside Ukraine, and as you drive down, the roads in different parts of Ukraine, like the apartment buildings, like damaged, blown out from missile attacks. It's unbelievable. So, yeah, I'm sorry, but that's not an accident. That's not an errant missile here or there. These are civilians being targeted.
And just like the beach, again, they put the missiles at the busy beach, knowing they would be struck.
Right. Yeah, they're because Sevastopol, that is a port, and they have military assets there. And then they're still encouraging people to go there for tourism while they have a military target there that is a legitimate target. So it's irresponsible to do that to your own people, to say, oh, yeah, go have a good weekend at the beach.
Oh, don't mind those missiles over there that is got a big bullseye on it, and you're standing right next to it. Duh.
Yeah, duh. And so the solution they came up with after that was to, I'm told that, or I read that they decided to put in bomb shelters so that people could run to the bomb shelters at the beach, right? But and here's the other thing about everything in Crimea and in that area, that's a big tourism area, right? Crimea, so tourism over the past year has just, it's bottomed out. Like, it's cut probably in about half from everything that I've been reading about it.
The Russians don't care about that. They just want it to be one big open warm water port. That's what the whole thing was about to begin with. Another thing, history, people have no clue, right? The 100 years of oppression of Russia on Ukraine, which is why Ukraine should have never given up the weapons. They were there because the Soviets withdrew from occupying it already.
And you are hearing stuff here tonight, folks, that you are probably not going to hear literally anywhere else, because I'm just not hearing this stuff come out of any other media outlet. Yeah. Nobody is reporting this information. And nobody.
They don't care about the Crimean people. Again, they want to turn it into just one big freshwater port, which was operating with Ukrainian permission on Ukrainian soil before they started this war, to create a land bridge to it so it could be completely unencumbered and used any way, shape, or form they chose without permission going forward, and expanding that port.
Which is more misinformation that was even propagated here about how that bridge is just used for civilian traffic, and that is not true. It is used for all purposes. It has become
which
a
made
link
it
for
a
tourism.
Legitimate military
That's
target.
right. They use it for the transport of military assets. It's they even have a rail transport on there. So it's a major connection for the Russian economy now. Into Crimea, which they just took. Putin just took it from Ukraine. Yeah. Just took it, annexed it. He stole it.
Yeah. And what about the supply lines and the staging of troops in their puppet state of Belarus? Targets in Belarus are fair game. And what they hadn't heard anywhere but from me on a previous show, Belarusian freedom fighters are striking Belarusian targets in Belarus, trying to shake it from being a Putin puppet state. They're fighting on the side of Ukraine because they want freedom too.
It's true.
But you don't hear it anywhere but here.
That's right. Yeah. The other thing is, well, you know what? Let's do this. The State Department, Matthew Miller, news conference today, talking about all of this. Let's just run a small portion of that where Matthew Miller addresses exactly this issue of Biden approving the use of ATACMS missiles. Here he is here. Okay, let me get this queued up. I thought I had it, but I'm going to have to bring it up one more time. Here we go.
Again.
Here we go. I've got him, Matthew Miller, at the State Department today. Oh, there we go.
So I'm not going to comment on it. Simon, go ahead.
What can you tell us about what the current policy is on whether Ukraine can launch long-range missile strikes into Russia using U.S. missiles?
I don't have any policy updates to speak to today. As you know, since even before Russia launched its full-scale invasion, the United States has marshaled a coalition of more than 50 countries to provide assistance to Ukraine and to hold Russia accountable for its actions. We have made clear that we will always adapt and adjust the capabilities that we provide to Ukraine when it's appropriate to do so, and you have seen us back that up with steps that we have taken over the past several years, but I don't have any new policy developments to speak to today.
Obviously, this is already being reported that there is a change of policy, and the Kremlin has responded saying this is a major escalation from the U.S. Do you have you're not confirming the policy change, but given that this is already information out there that Russians are responding to, what's your take on them accusing you of escalating this conflict?
Yeah, so again, I know this goes without saying, but let me say it anyway. I'm not going to speak to or confirm any policy changes. But when you look at escalation of this conflict, it has been Russia that has escalated the conflict time and time again. And that includes just in the recent month when Russia recruited the deployment of more than 11,000 North Korean soldiers who are now on the front lines in Kursk, engaging in combat operations against the Ukrainian military. That is a major escalation by Russia, bringing in an Asian military to a conflict inside Europe. And as we said, as the Secretary said, our response to that would be firm. And the supporters of Ukraine's response to that needed to be firm. And we will continue to do what is appropriate to hold Russia accountable for its actions, including its escalatory actions, and to hold North Korea accountable for its escalatory actions.
The Russians say that they can just deploy whoever they like to Kursk because it's inside their own country. What's the kind of principle here that a country can't bring in other troops to defend?
So the first principle that we need to remember, of course, and I know you haven't forgotten this, but for everyone else, is that it is Russia that started this war by invading the sovereign territory of its neighbor. Russia that invaded Ukraine supported proxy war in 2014, and then that launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And so if Russia wanted to stop the attacks on its territory, it's the aggressor here. And it could withdraw from Ukraine. It could stop targeting Ukrainian civilians. It could stop targeting Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. It could stop occupying Ukrainian territory. So it matters very much who is the aggressor in this conflict and who is the victim. But the fact that Ukraine is defending the occupation of its territory by launching attacks inside Russia in no way justifies the escalation of this conflict by introducing a foreign army into conflict directly with Ukrainian soldiers.
And you've said that since the election of Donald Trump as the president-elect, you've said you will surge remaining military assistance to Ukraine, with I guess the idea of strengthening the Ukrainians. From the sort of comments from Russia, sort of saying, well, this is an outgoing administration and they are acting irresponsibly by further escalating a conflict. And I know you're not confirming this particular act, but you have talked about rushing support for Ukraine and giving the Ukrainians as much as possible. Is there a danger that you are fueling the fire of a conflict that your successor may have a different view on?
The American people elected Joe Biden to a 4-year term, not to a term of 3 years and 10 months. And we will use every day of our term to pursue the foreign policy interests that we believe are on behalf, that we believe are in the interests of the American people. If the incoming administration wants to take a different view, that is, of course, their right to do so. And I expect in many cases they will do so. But it is our duty to fulfill the mandate that the American people gave to President Biden. And we will continue to do that. And I would add that when you look at the position of the American public on support for Ukraine, there has been overwhelming support among the American people, and there's been overwhelming support in Congress for providing this aid to Ukraine. So we're going to continue to provide it and get all of it out the door before we leave office.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Janet, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Russia and North Korea. Russian Kremlin stated that even after the war between Russia and Ukraine ends, North Korean troops will remain stationed in Russia. What are your concerns about the integration of North Korean troops into Russian units?
We continue to be greatly concerned about the security relationship between North Korea and Russia. And I think it's worth pointing out our concerns are not just because of the fact that North Korea has introduced its own forces onto the battlefield with Ukrainian soldiers, but what it is that North Korea might be getting in return. Seems very hard to believe that they sent 11,000 soldiers to fight in Russia, potentially die in combat against the Ukrainian military, without getting something in return. Now, we don't know what that may be, but it doesn't require a great leap of faith to believe that it is going to be something that is deeply destabilizing to security in Asia, which is why we have made those concerns quite clear to a number of countries in the region.
North Korean Kim Jong-un said nuclear strengthening and announced that the preparation for war had been completed. How do you assess the nuclear alliance between North Korea and Russia?
I just don't have any assessment at all to offer from here. Thank you.
Yeah, just follow up on Simon's question. Do you have anything to confirm the veracity of a news report that following a nod from the United States, France and UK have actually decided to allow Ukraine to use long-range fires to strike deep within Russia, including the Storm Shadow missiles.
I don't think you will be surprised at my answer, Nike. Having not been willing to confirm these reports about U.S. involvement, I'm certainly not going to speak to involvement on behalf of other countries.
During your recent meetings with European officials, what sense do you get regarding the Land for Peace?
Regarding Land for Peace, so I will say that when we were in Brussels last week and the Secretary met with a number of his foreign counterparts, met with the Secretary General of NATO, briefed the NAC and received updates from representatives of a number of NATO countries, and of course met with his British counterpart and had a number of other conversations over the past few weeks. What we have heard consistently is that it is for Ukraine to decide if it wants to enter into negotiations, when it enters into negotiations, what the parameters of those negotiations would be. That has been our policy, that it's up to Ukraine to make those decisions, and that has been the policy of our allies and partners, and we have seen no change in that policy by our allies and partners. But I do think it's always worth adding, when we talk about potential negotiations, that we have seen no change in posture by the government of Russia when it comes to negotiations. And you just have to look at the deadly attacks that Russia has launched against Ukraine over the past few days to see that far from showing any willingness to enter into negotiations, they continue to look for ways to escalate the conflict.
Was there a growing acknowledgement that countries may be forced to accept a political reality?
So I'm just not going to speak to private discussions among our allies, but in every conversation that we have had over the past weeks, we've heard the same thing that we have heard over the past few months, which is that it is up to Ukraine to decide Ukraine's future and that no other country can or should dictate that to them.
And if I may ask a transitional question, sorry about that. China House, how do you assess the future of the Operation China House given a State Department structure is expected?
Yeah, so again, I'm a little loath to predict the future under the incoming administration. I will speak on behalf of this administration and say that we have seen the work of China House to be absolutely instrumental to the policies we have pursued to manage our competition with China appropriately and to rally our allies and partners to...
Okay, that's enough because we're moving away from the core subject there. So go ahead, Joseph.
Couple things. One, they don't want to admit to the full reality. This initial 11 is a total commitment of 30K. This is just the first deployment. And Ukraine needs to strike anywhere and everywhere they are deployed into Russia to stage. And the electrical grid struck because they need electricity to stage. And fuel depots struck because they need fuel to stage. Don't even let them get anywhere close to the battlefield. You need to strike them as they're coming in and where they will be. And, quick shout out, Rusty, Helena, Dar, Whale, Andrew, Alicia, Jesse, bunch of others there in the chat. Just wanted to give you a hey. But the Land for Peace thing, look how well that worked all the time for Israel. No, Neville Chamberlain doesn't work. The only way I would support Trump in a Land for Peace settlement, and again, Ukraine must hold Russian territory in order to have a hand to come to the poker table to swap with. But Land for Peace, the only way I support it is if Ukraine is admitted immediate NATO upon whatever's left of Ukraine is NATO. A third Democrat administration will not be allowed to let Russia and Putin have a third bite at the apple. They will be NATO, and full NATO will respond. Peace through strength.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear that coming from you, because I know that, in many respects you are, you're like me. I think you're kind of conservative. You have been basically pro-Trump. You're no fan of the Democrats, but like me, I think you're an independent thinker. and not just to sheeple following any crowd, whether it's this crowd, that crowd, the MAGA crowd, the Democrat crowd, and any crowd.
I want peace, but I've learned from 250 plus years of warfare, the last 250 years, appeasement and trade-offs and weakness doesn't work. It breeds a bigger conflict.
In fact, I would say that it's the timidity, the apprehension, the fear of Putin that has helped facilitate all of this. It's given him really indications at various points along his new milestones are reached. It's like, oh, I can do this because they've indicated that they won't be using these weapons, or they're openly stating that they will not cross this line and use weapons in this way. So I can do this. And he takes it to the next level and the next level.
Neville Chamberlainism, I want peace. But the concept of peace at any cost, the only way peace at any cost works is surrender. Maybe you want to be slaves. I don't.
I have to admit that, I was kind of sucked in at the beginning because I would give the benefit of the doubt, and then he kind of got to a point and it was like, I was told by pro-Russian people that he didn't really want the whole country. He just wants neutrality.
Putin's brain.
Yeah,
Putin's
but
brain. Yeah.
No, it's all turned out to be very disingenuous, outright lies. It's very clear right now that he's not just going to sit still. Like I said a year ago. Well, in other interviews with somebody else who was on this program, I said, I think he has everything he wants anyway. They should just sue for peace, and maybe we could have.
They could have. Russia could have. Okay.
Yes.
Right. He could have done the whole Hitler thing with Chamberlain. My goals are satisfied, and calm things down at least for a little while. He isn't even smart enough to learn from Hitler in that and lull your enemy into a set of false sense of security and indeed take that third bite at the apple later.
Yeah, and so
I think he recognizes there won't be a third bite at it.
So just to backtrack a little bit, this map shows how far, you see, there's some misconceptions here, I think, as well about what all of this means, right? Well, first of all, let me show you this. That's the map, but...
Yeah, and you're not even showing targets in Belarus.
Yeah, so let me just show you... I want to show you... Here we go. Here's InfoWars. Here's the headline on InfoWars.
Oh, my favorite site. Take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, we talked about this earlier.
Yeah, I mean, on InfoWars, everything is always the fault of the United States and
way over the top.
Yeah. Shock video. An out of his mind Joe Biden announces plan to end the world. So, I mean.
He could cause it, but no way he could plan it.
He just, I get that people are worried about World War III. I am too. And when I think we're already in World War III, but, I mean, an escalation to an actual global thermonuclear conflict. Yeah, I'm worried about that. But I don't think Joe Biden woke up in the morning with a match in one hand and decided to set the world on fire. Yeah. I don't think he's that insane.
Yeah, what's the Sting song? Let us pray that the Russians love their children too. The Russians do. Their leaders don't give a flying you-know-what.
Well, it's Putin.
They'll be in the bunkers, the nuclear-proof bunkers.
I hate to say this for my Russian-loving friends, but just stand back, try to be objective, and my views on this have evolved over time. And look, there's one man who keeps threatening to use nuclear weapons. Yeah. Only one guy. and that's Vladimir Putin.
The
over
Russian
and over
people are not my enemy.
Right.
Have never been. The leadership has always been. Going back from Lenin on up.
Mm. And I haven't heard, have you heard of it? Like, have any U.S. presidents in recent times said to Russia, you better watch it or we're going to nuke you? Has Biden ever said that?
I don't know. Didn't Biden accidentally slip something like that once about, I don't remember.
Slip of the tongue kind of a thing?
Like, I don't. He might have. But yeah, no, we tend to want to try to de-escalate things and assure, the problem is mutually assured destruction is not a deterrent anymore because these crazies don't care.
Yeah.
People, Russians, you are not my enemy. Your leaders do not care one whit if you're vaporized. They will be in the nuclear bunkers for the next 100 years with all the food and resources they've stolen from you so they can live underground 100 years and then come back out.
And in recent weeks, Putin used a very alarming turn of phrase. For me, very alarming. He said, and I think this was during the BRICS conference, he said, if missiles like this, in this scenario, are used against us, or these kinds of weapons are used against us in Russian territory, we reserve the right to use nuclear weapons. And I thought, what the hell is that? What do you mean you reserve the right to use nuclear weapons? Who has the right to use nukes? I mean, that's you can argue, is it a war crime? Isn't it a war crime? Blah blah blah. But ultimately, that's a very strange thing for anyone to say. We have the right to nuke you. If you shoot a missile at us, we have the right to nuke you. Like I have the right to free speech. I have the right to exist. I have the right to nuke you if I feel threatened because if Ukraine shoots at us with a missile because we've attacked their country, if they fight back, if you fight back and punch us in the nose the way we punched you in the nose, then we have the right to incinerate you.
Yeah,
we get to vaporize you with our nukes because we're bigger than you.
Always threaten first strike, and they wonder why we need defensive missiles and defensive battery missiles everywhere. Most of our missile systems are defensive in nature to shoot down incoming offensive weapons.
Mm-hmm. And that's really where Ukraine has been left. That's where Israel has largely been left.
The Iron Dome.
The Iron Dome. It's like, well, what are they worried about? They only shot like 1,000 missiles last night, but they could shoot them all down. So what's the big deal? Well, because they shot 1,000 missiles at them. That's why.
They shouldn't need an Iron Dome.
Right. If they're under attack and they're firing missiles at you, right, then I would say whether you can shoot them down or not, like that's an attack.
And I think that is what in part worries Putin with Trump. He realizes we're looking to cut spending, and there is plenty at the Pentagon to cut, like all the DEI crap, all kinds of woke generals that can be fired. There's all kinds of places to cut, but he's talking about a Iron Dome for the U.S. and like Reagan's SDI. Could that bring about a Gorbachev? Maybe after they wake up and overthrow Putin. I don't know. And we could get an era of peace again, at least for a while, till the next Putin comes along. Because remember, people, history. Putin was Yeltsin's PM. He was waiting in the wings and was undermining Yeltsin, who came after Gorbachev and was still promising perestroika. Putin undermined him in order to ascend to the presidency and then PM for a while, then back to he's been dictator of Russia for several decades now, and people still refuse to recognize it and refuse to recognize over and over his boast to reconstitute the Soviet Empire.
And I'm it's sad to say, but a lot of the online and even mainstream media analysts out there, they come in so poorly prepared. They don't know their history. They're not well versed in what's really going on. I don't know. I've just been so disappointed in the lack of quality of the analysis that I'm seeing and getting out there. So
people don't remember that Putin was behind the coup against Yeltsin that temporarily failed, but then he ousted him a little bit later anyway. But he tried to overthrow Yeltsin in a coup.
I just watched Piers Morgan taking on a pro-Russian influencer, and after the pro-Russian influencer, I'm not going to even name who it is because I don't want to lead people to him, but he lays out the story, the narrative, the Russian narrative, and all that Piers Morgan had coming back is, well, I think that what you said is basically a pile of crap. That was his argument. I thought,
because they can't counter the Orwellian tale they're rewriting history to be, because Pierce doesn't know anything.
It was like, bring the guy to me. Like, I'll have a discussion with him. Bring him over here, because Piers Morgan is ill-equipped to deal with it. That's not an argument. I think what you said is a bunch of crap. Like, that's not going to cut it, man.
We have stated verifiable fact. And again, the Mr. Jones movie, for so many people who are so damn clueless, the Mr. Jones movie, it's a movie, but loosely based on reality of the Soviets occupying Ukraine before Hitler invaded anyone. And as I say over and over, they invaded Finland before Hitler invaded anyone. They invaded Poland in a pact with Hitler at the same time.
Yeah. And
yet people are surprised what transpired after World War II.
And these headlines that we're getting on places like InfoWars, it's like junk food journalism. It's really just dumbed down. It's a narrative. It's a story, but it's selective pieces of information. There's a lot of stuff that's left out to sort of support the narrative that they want you to follow. There's a lot of lying going on in there too. Yeah. Honestly, if you really get to know your stuff, you start to pick out the lies within a lot of this, right? And one of the things that I've picked up on in the last 24 hours is that whether it's Alex Jones or others who are actually regurgitating what he says, because a lot of these low information influencers just regurgitate what he says. And the narrative out there is that Putin is really acting defensively because the missiles that the U.S. is providing can be retrofitted with nuclear warheads if they want to do that. And so
virtually anything can be.
Blah, blah, blah. So therefore, because it's potentially could maybe be equipped with a nuclear warhead, then that's why he's really acting in defense, even though he's the guy that's escalated, and this is a response to that, but it's not, so it's all our fault.
I could get to Ontario through Mexico, or I could just go across the river.
And what they're not telling you is that, first of all, okay, this is not the... It is sort of escalatory, right? This does take everything to a bit of a new level, but Putin Crimea is part of Ukraine. Russia stole it. They took it over. Putin took that, okay? In his first incursion.
Except for that base.
Right?
Which again,
which was a lease. They were leasing that. They were leasing that from Ukraine.
Yes.
Which is where the Black Sea Fleet is stationed, okay?
Yes.
And so it was like, no problem, you've got the lease, you've got your fleet there, but that wasn't good enough. He wanted to take all of Crimea, so now he doesn't have to pay the lease anymore, right? So
easily verifiable fact.
That's right. So Now he has, and it's extremely valuable. It's strategic for Russia. They need that. They want it because it's a deep water, warm water port year round.
That's why we tolerate Turkey as part of NATO. They should otherwise be kicked. But Erdogan is more an Islamic fundamentalist. Too bad we didn't support the coup against him. But he's helped block in the Russian fleet there.
And in addition to that, I've also come across information within the last week that, and this is echoes of what Stalin did to the poor Ukrainians, okay?
Mr. Jones, the movie covers that. The starvation, the genocide via starvation of Ukraine then.
Ukraine, during the Soviet era, was produced about 40% of all the economic output of those Soviet bloc countries.
Yep.
Okay, 40%. That's how valuable it is, and that's largely because of agriculture. It is the breadbasket for that whole part of the world, right? They produce so much grain, and as I say, echoes of Stalin, because since the outbreak of this war, Putin has stolen from Ukrainian farmers over $1 billion worth of grain. $1 billion worth of grain.
Putin sees himself as Stalin.
You're not hearing that anyplace else, folks. You're not hearing that anywhere else. $1 billion worth of grain just stolen by Putin to fund this war.
I mean, Stalin and Putin almost make Lenin look like a day at the beach.
So that's not right. I mean, I'm sorry, but they just take the grain that the farmers in Ukraine grew, harvested, and then he just took it. $1 billion worth. Just the way he took Ukraine or Crimea. Just took it, right? And all the industrial area up in the Donbass, he just confiscates. He just took it. And then divvies it up.
That's
to his
the
friends.
Excuse. Again, any part of history, you got to go far enough back, right? Yeah. They're claiming to the Stalin era days that is all Russian territory. No, it was always occupied territory.
Another inconvenient. Okay, so I mean, there's all kinds of stuff we could go into historically, but let's just come back to where we're at right now. And this is the information that people are not really getting elsewhere. Okay, so the approval to use these U.S. weapons is another step in this whole war.
But as you said, it's a response. It's like the Crusades. Yes. I am tired of morons saying the Crusades were an attack of the Catholic Church upon Islamic peoples. Mm-hmm. No, the Crusades were a response to not all Muslims, Islamic radicals then that encroached on Jewish and Christian lands and were slaughtering Christians and Jews, and the people spoke and rose up, we need to take these lands back so that Jews, Christians, and yes, even Muslims would be able to live in peace.
So the point that I was going to make is that the approval to use these weapons inside Russian territory, I don't know why Putin is flipping out at this point, because he already claims that Crimea is Russia. And they've been using Storm Shadow missiles and ATACMS on targets within Crimea, military targets within Crimea for a long time. And so because you're looking at it like that, it's like, well, then why is this even really that much different? It really kind of isn't, unless, of course, you don't really consider Crimea to be part of
He's
Russia.
Admitting it.
That's right. That's exactly
For
right,
those
and indirectly.
who actually have a brain that functions to understand it, there's the admission. And as we talked many times on other shows, the only way you will be able to have a sue for peace, land for peace, settlement opportunity at all is poker table. You don't bluff with a pair of twos. You've got to have an ace or two up your sleeve. That's where the offensive into Russia matters. They must hold Russian territory to be able to sue as a swap for Ukrainian land back. That's the only way it will work. Again, art of war versus art of stupid.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind here is that while we're being told by all these, I would say, low information social media influencers out there that this will just allow strikes deep within Russian territory, that's not really true. Okay, so here's a map showing exactly how this scenario is laid out. The sort of the pinkish area there, that's Russian military control of Ukrainian territory, including Crimea in pink there.
Russian territory is a sliver.
Right. And then this area here, the red line on the outside within Russia, on the right-hand side of the map, that's the maximum range that Ukrainian missiles could reach. And what you're looking at here is ATACMS launched from Ukraine really can only reach about 119 miles or 300 kilometers inside Russian territory. That won't even quite reach, I don't believe, Moscow. So it's not like they're trying to target Moscow. They
could hit the capital of Belarus, but they couldn't even hit all of Belarusian territory.
And so all these airplane symbols, those are military air bases from which Russia is using those as staging areas to launch assaults on Ukraine from those locations.
Those must be targeted.
Right. And the HIMARS missiles, right, only have a range of 47 miles, and that's blue line
right
in there. So the idea that this is like, I think people have, because, like I say, the low information social media influencers out there are just sort of regurgitating information, not giving real accurate information, and leading people to think that this is going to be like some full-scale attack on, like, Moscow and St. Petersburg and all these other targets within Russia and just starting to blow up all the buildings. No.
Get off the internet. Go to an old library, ask for the old book section, and go into the basement in the bowel of the old libraries and get history books from 50 years ago. And you can confirm all these things we're saying about the history of that region in actual real history books versus the Orwellian rewrite garbage they're trying to feed you through Google searches, being weighted more towards anti-American, pro of our enemy searches. You're finding opinion pieces. Go find the real history books. Hell, go to Moscow, go in their basement, and even see all the history of what they wrote about Stalin occupying Ukraine.
Yeah. So it's important to keep context, perspective here, to provide proper context and perspective. This is not going to result in just a free-for-all on Ukraine's part, just starting to fire missiles at all these different targets within Russia. There will still, it's clear, this is still coming with pretty severe restrictions. They will only be able to use them on certain kinds of targets, and specifically, I think you're looking at air bases, rocket launch facilities, places where they're launching drone attacks from.
Ukraine should do oops, we accidentally hit a few electrical grid targets. Just accidental.
And Ukraine already has the capability with the drones that they are producing within Ukraine now, because they have ramped up production domestically of those kinds of weapons. And they have been hitting ammo depots that we've shown you here, footage of that, other military assets within Russia already using drones. But some of these kinds of targets are fortified and can't really effectively be taken out with just drones.
Yeah, but you touched on another important thing here also. Iran mass-producing drones from technology that Obama gave him when they let a drone land over there. So they're building highly capable drones, reverse engineered from our stuff, and sending it to Russia.
Yeah. So this is, I don't know, Joseph. This is, I as much as I'm worried about a nuclear war, and I don't like it when Putin sits there and rattles the nuclear saber the way that he does. If this is the justification to nuke us,
and are we just going to surrender? If we're going to just surrender all of Ukraine, then he's taken the Baltics too. Have people learned nothing from history? Have they learned nothing about these tyrants?
And so the question is, I mean, you can clearly see that, like, I think Biden has done this for a few different reasons. He's done it because the North Korean troops are there, about 11,000 so far. I've seen reports just within the last couple of days now that North Korea is now getting ready to send an additional up to 100,000 troops. So that's in the information pipeline, and I think that's credible. I think that they're looking at that. So this is another major escalation on the Russian side that is in the works that we're hearing about. I also saw reports, verifiable, with interviews with these soldiers who are from Cuba, who are over there fighting, not like 10,000 or 11,000 of them, but they do have like a contingent of them, all fighting
all
together.
Of this too, part of the problem was Biden, the crime family, always using Ukraine as a money laundering operation. Had we been sending all actual military hardware and bread, like I said on your show, I'm for sending bread and bullets, not money, because a lot of that's just being laundered.
You know, the other thing that has come to my attention over the last 6 months or so that really has shifted my perception and my
I knew you'd come around eventually.
Opinion of even Zelensky, right? Is that from the very beginning, like worried about corruption, worried about money laundering, all of these things, but remember Gonzalo Lira, the journalist, who made a really big deal out of how Zelensky came to power, right? And he focused a lot on Kolomoisky, the billionaire who owned the TV network and selected him as the star of the show and blah, 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 right? What's happened is, since taking office, because the European Union has indicated to Ukraine that the only way that they can integrate more into the EU is to deal with corruption and address it and hold corrupt people and oligarchs accountable, is to fight it.
In it.
No, yeah. So, but here's the thing. But get this. Let me finish. Zelensky has done just that. In fact, to the point where Kolomoisky, the guy who is alleged to have created Zelensky, he's now facing charges of corruption within the country. So Zelensky is actually the guy that created Zelensky, allegedly, is now in a lot of trouble. He's up on charges and is in court.
The whole Biden corruption scheme there too, though. He turned a blind eye to all that because he was part of that.
Of course he was. Yes, he was.
So again, Zelensky is corrupt. Biden is corrupt. So is
No. That's the thing, Joseph.
Argument.
That's the thing. This is the thing about Zelensky. I was convinced too, but now I'm not so sure, because this is a guy who is following through with anti-corruption measures, anti-corruption legislation, programs. He's holding these people accountable, even the people within his own circle He's holding them accountable. And I was like, are you, I had to go find more information to verify it, but it is true. It's true. And that floored me. It really did. I was like, my God, I can't believe that that's actually but you're not hearing about it anywhere. It's not being reported over here at all. This is a failure of the information pathways in order to get actual news out, because everything is being drowned out by all of the other noise surrounding the conflict.
Yeah.
But these details that really truly matter are not getting out. Instead, we're getting the propaganda about Zelensky buying casinos and yachts and even small countries for his own personal use with the money that the U.S. is sending. And that's not true. Those are all verifiably false stories, but this is
the money
actually
is
true.
fungible, and that's why they could get away with making those allegations. And if we weren't sending the money, but physical things instead, there would be less of that.
The other thing that this also shows me is that Zelensky is not a puppet of Biden. He is not a puppet of the Democrat government or the U.S. government. And he, even in things that he has said just in the past week, where it's like he's making it very clear that regardless of what happens with has been happening with Biden or what will happen with Trump, they are a sovereign nation, and he is going to make his own decisions. He's not talking like he's a puppet of the U.S. at all. Quite the opposite. So when I'm listening to what he's really saying, it's like, I don't know, all these allegations that this was a coup in 2014 and he's just a U.S. puppet, it's not true. He's trying, he wants integration with the EU as the people voted for at that time. And in order to do that, he is following through to address the demands from the EU that they deal with issues like corruption and meet all of the conditions for EU integration and membership. And not NATO membership, European Union integration for economic trade. That's what that's about. That's also what Putin has been very upset about. He doesn't want that at all. But no, the Ukrainian people do.
And it's tough to do any of that now while there's a war going on. Like I wrote a piece at thelibertybeacon.com, all these people, Zelensky's a dictator. He canceled elections. Well, how exactly
it's a war.
How do you hold a free and fair election during a war? Excuse me, Mr. Putin.
No country does.
Would you mind us putting our election boxes here? And, we trust you won't meddle with the results there. Now, of course he couldn't hold the election, you morons.
No, I mean, and that's the other narrative that's spun up, right, is that he's a dictator because they suspended elections. Every country has provisions in their constitutions and their laws that provide for the suspension of elections during wartime. It's just what's done.
In the United States, were we to let southern slave states, once the Civil War was going, to participate in the next presidential election? Hello? I mean, come on.
So
it's a war zone. Yes, perhaps he could have held partial elections in the free areas to elect new representatives in the free areas for a new parliament in the free areas. But whole swaths would not be able to vote. So how is that a complete, fair, and free election? But at least he would have partially done parliament where he could have. That would have bought him a lot. And I spoke to that in my article. If he'd have met it part way.
And I understand the argument that Russia is worried about NATO surrounding them and, all of these things. But
purely defensive, it's bull.
Upon really close scrutiny, it just doesn't really hold water.
Correct, it does not.
It really doesn't.
There's only been one aggression by NATO, and that was following 9/11. There was the other time that we've gone into places as Western allies. The South Korean War. China and Russia pulled out of the UN. It became a UN action. South Korean War was not NATO. It was UN. Like during Clinton, the Bosnian. It was a UN action. None of these were NATO. None of them. Zero.
Mm-hmm. He's worried about missiles being launched from Ukraine if it's a NATO country. But, given what the technology is out there, there are other countries that are NATO countries right now that could launch missiles into Russia at any time. So it doesn't hold water. It doesn't
was
make
never a threat to Russia. Part of NATO or not, they were never ever a threat to Russia. It was always a threat the other way, and 100 years of history show that to anyone who is not a retard and willing to spend more than 5 seconds looking at things other than Putin ass-kicking apologist propaganda.
And I spent way too much time giving credit and benefit of the doubt to people who I was maybe even intellectually intimidated by, like Professor John Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs. But you know what? Bring them to me now. Bring them here, and we'll have a conversation.
Well, I appreciated your attempt at intellectual honesty. As I said, I always knew eventually you'd get here.
Bring me the professors. Okay, bring them here, give them to me, the layman, and we'll have the conversation, because I see giant gaping holes in their arguments, and I would love to have them here. Bring them on. Or bring me Colonel McCheese. Now, there's another guy, okay? Bring me Colonel McCheese, because there's another guy I would love to have the conversation with, because he's just so full of it.
The idiot commie who admitted to voting for communists in our own country, Brennan, one of the 51 that signed on to the fake Russian collusion delusion, he's more pro-communist than he's pro-American. But yet, Democrat administrations want him as part of their administration because they're all anti-American. They believe this idiocy of maybe eventually they'll come around. If we're nice to them, eventually they'll be nicer to us. It's never worked that way. It is never gonna work that way. Peace through strength.
Yeah, that's what the Reagan approach was, and it was effective. And I miss Ronald Reagan. When I sit back and I think, what would Ronald Reagan do in this situation? And I'll tell you, things would look a whole lot different today if Reagan were here taking care of this, I think.
Well, and I don't let Reagan off the hook. I mean, I love the man. I thought, but nobody on this planet is perfect. We're all frail, flawed humans, right? Part of the appeasement or part of the America is a paper tiger argument happened because he withdrew from the Beirut barracks after the bombing. He should have said, we are going to level your asses. Not we're cutting and running. He cut and run, and that gave the Ayatollahs more ground to then gain on Hamas and Hezbollah building.
Speaking of a paper tiger, all we've heard for nearly 3 years now, 1,000 days of war almost, is that Ukraine didn't stand a chance. Russia's way too powerful. The United States should just back down, not get involved, because there's absolutely no way that the U.S. could win. It's hopeless. Russia's just so powerful. Putin's smart.
Yeah, that Ukraine alone couldn't do it.
So here's my question, Joseph. If that's the case, why is Putin threatening nuclear war? If they're so frickin' powerful, if he's so smart, if there's absolutely no chance that Ukraine can prevail, if the U.S., if we're so weak, We're so inept. We're so whatever that there's no chance. And we just give up.
How haven't they accomplished
Then why after, okay, first of all, why has this gone on for 3 years? And secondly, why is he so afraid? Why is he so afraid that he has to keep threatening to nuke us? Because it's because he's afraid. Because of everything that we've been told by these pundits, by him, by all these pro-Russian, low information propagandists and just regurgitative social media influencers has been either just misguided regurgitation or outright lies. It's not true. It's not true.
The Russian people are not my enemy. And when I say, sorry, you need to feel it, I don't mean we allow attacks on the Russian people, but taking out grids, which are both civilian and military targets, yes. And byproduct of that is you feel it too. Feel the reality of war, and then maybe you'll get on your leader and get him the hell out of there to bring an end to this.
Indeed. In fact, we are seeing cracks in the even support for Putin within Russia, which you don't really hear about any other place than here, at least in the West. But some of the oligarchs who would really just like this war to be over with, the support for Putin is waning a bit because even within the population of Russia, people are not happy with the war over there either. They want it to end. Too many body bags coming back.
Yeah.
Right?
They like perestroika. They want to make money too.
Sure. And that's what we should be focused on. Let's make money and let's make peace.
All of us
and everybody
together
makes money and we'll just make the world better.
For everybody, yes.
Sure.
Rising tide, lifting
no need
all
for
boats.
this. No need for this. But I'm sorry. And then this idea, like I'm even seeing Donald Trump Jr. saying, this is just Joe Biden trying to start World War III before we take office. Well, for crying out loud, I mean, like,
no need
simpleton,
for that. Please.
Like, whatever. That's politics, I guess, right? But, nah.
No. That's over a line. I expect better. See, the difference is I'm clear what side I claim to be on, but at the same time, I don't wear that partisan hat all the time. Yeah. I call out my side when they go too far, and that went too far.
Yeah, I think so too. And I've in the past been, very critical of very, very, very critical of Joe Biden and the Democrats and Trudeau and and less so maybe Trump. But I'm not going to sit here and pull punches either with Trump. Like, this is my job as a journalist is to hold politicians accountable, and just pursue the truth, regardless of what the politics is surrounding it. I'm just trying to get you truth.
In his first term,
sure,
and trying to correct a lot of that, he might go overboard on the other, like the use of military. Spare me the posse comitatus crap.
Yeah.
When you've got gangs literally taking over blocks of a city, that's not posse comitatus at all. You get the Rangers and the SEALs to train for a couple of months, and then on one day you go in with them and take back those buildings from them and give them back to our real citizens.
And
that's not a military action against our citizens.
But
that's bailing them out
of
an occupied force.
Sure. To bring it back to the issue at hand, what do you think? See, I think as much as Trump has told people he's going to end the war in a day, I guess he meant when he takes office, although people I think were expecting him to do it before he takes office. I don't know that that's really appropriate, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's far too complex. I think that he may try. I hope he does, but I don't think it will happen that way. And I don't think ultimately the response and that you're going to get from Trump is going to be what the MAGA people have been really hoping for. What do you think?
Yeah, it's always been a degree of hyperbole. And our enemy, Russia, not the Russian people, Putin, and the communist stranglehold still over there, they have a say in this. And again, the only way there can be a peace is if we make them feel it, and Ukraine holds big chunks of Russia to be able to trade, to sue for that peace. But yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. And anyone who doesn't understand that was a bit of hyperbole is probably a Trump cultist, which I have never been, will never be. Again, he's human. I agree and disagree with everyone based on the merits of whatever the issue, principles, not personalities. And yeah, it's not ending overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It's not going to unwind overnight. But indeed, he brings a more stronger position to the table to bring about the peace than another 4 years of Biden would have ever done. It would have absolutely gone on another 4 years under him.
You know, it's sort of in a way a replay of past wars. You look at even World War II, and it took the United States some time to come around and actually get involved in World War II. So maybe it's just history rhyming in a way. What do you think?
I think there's probably some merit to how you're using that as an analogy. Every situation is different, but as you said, yeah, history may not absolutely repeat, but it rhymes a lot. And it does because a lot of dumb people don't know any history to learn from it.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, is to actually learn from it. And in some cases, I think you have to sort of let things from the past go so that you can move ahead. But it seems like, especially with where Russia is at and Putin, it's like you can't forget it, but you got to kind of let it go, like let the grudge go so you can move forward and reconcile and find a path to peace.
And we thought we had that with Gorbachev and Perestroika.
Yes.
And we did for a while. And Bill Clinton, to a degree, kind of blew it because of the peace dividend he wanted to then spend on leftism here in America. If we indeed would have gone in and helped Russia out better, building their infrastructure and creating those, I understand what I'm talking about here. Sounds an awful lot like globalism, but this isn't the early 1900s. We are all kind of attached globally now. There's these things called ICBMs. Any spot on Earth can be hit from 30 minutes from any other spot on Earth. So, yes, we have to think globally to some degree while maintaining our own sovereignty.
Yes. And that is the new reality. I mean, it's all interconnected, both militarily because of missiles, right?
I don't want to live in the past, but I want to at least learn from it, please.
And even the economy. It's a global economy. It has been for decades, many decades now.
Yep.
Certainly, I'd say really started to really shift toward a global economy in like the 80s. Just it's been progressively more and more integrated over time.
Perestroika years, in a way, right? Yeah. But at the same time, I forgot what I was going to say, where I was going to go with that. We can have these interconnections and interdependencies, but recognize there are people still married to the past, and as you said, the old grudges that we trust but verify, also to bring in what Reagan said, right? I want to trust them. I want to get along with them. I want to cooperate with them, but time after time after time, they show over and over again aggression towards everybody else.
Indeed. And, the other narrative that I keep hearing from the pro-Russian side is that, and the U.S. pulled out of these different nuclear arms deals. But, there are reasons for that they never give you the reason. It's because the Russians were refusing. Yeah, they didn't abide by it. They stopped allowing inspections to verify, and so the U.S. would say, well, then what's the point? We can't stay in the agreement, so we withdraw.
There's a difference between trying to cooperate and do a treaty versus surrender. That's the only real thing to assure peace, is to live under somebody else's jackboot. Just surrender. Maybe you want to be a slave, but I don't. That's like Trump and the America First. I'm all on board with America First.
Me too.
I have never will be on board with America alone or America only. And that's never been Trump's position. Fortress America is no more. Again, those ICBMs, long-range bombers, this isn't the early 1900s. It's the early 2000s, and we need to learn from the past, but deal in the reality we have. We can no longer be Fortress America, and Wilson helped bring about World War II by pulling out of World War I and saying, okay, you deal with Germany, and that shit treaty of Versailles that more or less guaranteed the German people would be so downtrodden and wanting revenge for that at some point that Hitler got his rise. People don't learn.
Yeah. It was the pain, the economic pain that the German people went
now,
through.
Like post-war now, the Marshall Plan to help build Germany and Japan after the war, and they are, of course, our allies today. That's the example. It's gone wrong, hadn't taken root, hasn't worked yet totally in Afghanistan because of all the corruption and the difference of culture there, but we at least tried to learn from the difference between World War I and World War II. And again, 9/11 and all that stuff was brought on because we didn't apply it after we helped kick Russia aggressing upon Afghanistan in the 80s. Our failure to engage them economically and help bring them along and make them an ally then, which then turned them into an enemy.
Indeed, there's the whole Afghanistan issue that people hear. There's a Russian narrative that circles around that too. But it's like I keep hearing people say all these really anti-American things about Afghanistan. I'm like, that's not really quite accurate, but I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax, and we could get into the history there another night, and that's complicated with the Mujahideen
Russia invaded Finland before we went into that, post World War II. Russia at Ukraine, Chechnya, Georgia, Afghanistan, all the places they aggressed, but we're supposed to believe Putin's a guy of peace.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of my favorite Mavericks. I mean, messages me virtually every day with, the United States just goes around invading countries, and and they're just a big bully, and it's all the U.S.'s fault. They're evil. Well, no, man, it's not that simple. It's
gray areas.
Geopolitics and all these different factors, and
It's like the Crusades lie again. The Crusades were a response. They were a defense. They were not us aggressing. We were responding to the aggression that occurred. And that's what we do, not always, most of the time. We are
not to say that mistakes haven't been made. Big mistakes have been made, sure.
Absolutely.
And we'll call that out too. But
I'm not rah America.
It's just you need to look at all sides. You need to have proper perspective. And I would say that a lot of people are not getting that right now.
Yeah.
A lot of people are basing their opinions on social media that is feeding them information that keeps amplifying a particular point of view, because as you click on stuff, it keeps feeding you the same kind of information. You kind of get caught in your own bubble, in an information bubble, and it just amplifies things. And it's strange how it's affecting people's minds.
USA has been more good than bad, whereas Russia, since Lenin, has been far more bad than good.
Well, I can understand why Ukrainians want to live in a sovereign nation where they have self-determination and true freedom. I totally get it. And I wish that
years of being under the Russian boot. Yeah.
Yes, and why not? Like, why wouldn't you want them to have that? And what is that wrong with that? Nothing. If you truly want a neutral country, I'm all in on that, right? But it's pretty clear that Putin, disingenuous when he keeps saying, "Oh, we're ready for peace talks," and no, if you really go back and then you really look, it's like, no, these things like, and then Ukraine just walked away from the peace talk. No, it wasn't quite like that. It was not. The point is, these claims on his side disingenuous.
Surrender, you expect them to walk away.
It's pretty clear that what Putin wants is total capitulation. He wants to keep the land that he's got, and he might agree to the installation to having Ukraine as a sovereign nation, as long as he gets to install a pro-Russian, pro-Putin president like he had in Yanukovych. And he's got Yanukovych waiting over in the wings, ready to put right back in there the way it was back in 2014, before the people voted against more Russian for European Union integration, and Yanukovych ended up fleeing the country because of the Maidan uprising.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
The Russian leadership has always considered Ukraine their puppet, their property. Like Democrats had always viewed blacks as their slaves. It's just an economic plantation, as Candace Owens says. They feel they own them. Russia feels that Ukraine was always there to abuse however they saw fit.
And as much as, I've heard the pro-Russian narrative that 2014 was just a U.S. military coup, a U.S. CIA coup in Ukraine. No. Actually, even that recorded conversation with Victoria Nuland, no. That you really analyze that, and again, the narrative doesn't really quite hold water. Not when you apply proper context and perspective. It's
you expect that. I would expect Putin to try to sell that again. I mean, I've got tinyurl.com Putin apology, Putin atrocity apologist, right?
Mm-hmm.
I expect him to peddle a lot of crap. The problem I have is the morons that buy into it because they don't look at anything real.
Mm-hmm.
They just, okay, I'll accept that. Give me a poop pie and tell me it's, pumpkin. Or,
and even when Tucker Carlson went over for his interview, I was like, okay, I watched
Tucker,
him, and then it was like totally, completely unprepared. Right? Doesn't know any of the history. Like, he's going into this interview that's going to be shown around the world. That's a huge audience. And all he could do when Putin started to spout off about all this history that he's sharing is he just sat there kind of with his mouth open. And let him talk for like 40 minutes. Yeah. Just let him just...
That's like the Kamalunist on 60 Minutes and any other program, right?
Right.
Well, okay, you're here. Tell us what you want us to believe. We won't fact check any of it.
So
Tucker did that with Putin. Yeah.
So Putin gets to give his historical revisionism, right? And say that Crimea belongs to him. And Tucker goes, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I completely lost all respect for him when that happened.
And then he goes to then he goes to the Russian equivalent of Mickey D's after and goes, "Oh, it tastes just like home." Oh man, I don't know. And people are like, "Oh yeah, oh." I could go on, and maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I probably shouldn't tonight. It's just, it's just become absurd, honestly.
Yeah. I think we've tried putting 100 pounds of you-know-what into, unfortunately, too many people's heads only have a 10-pound capacity.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, bottom line is, I want peace. I know you want peace. We all want peace.
Please.
Sure.
I don't want to die in a nuclear winter. I don't want any Russian to die in a nuclear winter, but I absolutely positively want to abide by mutually assured destruction, which brings us back to Putin doesn't care about you. They've got 100 years of supplies in their nuclear-proof bunkers where they will retreat to after they start the nuclear exchange. They don't care about you.
And you know who else I don't really think cares? Alex Jones. Because when you have headlines like that, and when I've been listening to him, especially over the past week, with regard to this, it's like, actually, what he's doing with these stories is escalatory.
Yeah.
It really, truly is.
Yeah.
It's irresponsible. A lot of people listen to him and believe what he says.
He sprinkles in a few things that are indeed fact and conspiracy reality. I've never been a fan of Alex Jones, and as we were talking earlier, I think he's controlled opposition. But I've said it before, and I'm going to upset some people. There are QAnoners, and I'm happy to be proclaimed part of the Q Army. And when I was under attack on Twitter by Hitlery, one of the mighty 200, the start of the whole Russian collusion thing before it was turned on Trump. The Q Army came to my rescue. But there are QAnoners and there are QAnutters. There is a difference. And Alex Jones, to me, has always been a nutter.
Well, he just, and so, I mean, he's very disappointing. That's what I have to say about Alex Jones and what he's been doing lately, especially with regard to Russia and Ukraine. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Because it's not, but you know, Biden, the Democrats, they don't get off the hook here either, man. They've led us to this place. Yeah. So,
and
terrible foreign policy.
You know, people like to call me a neocon. Whatever, just call me the name. I don't give a damn. I do want peace, but I understand, again, the lessons of history. And surrender is the only way you have peace, and then you're under their boot. Surrender is the only way to assure peace, but then do you really have a peace? So I want peace, but through strength and not appeasement, because I've learned history, and to kind of wrap things up and bring them around. Yeah. The only way this ends is if they feel it like the Ukrainians feel it and force both sides to the table.
Yes, I think you're right about that. And just even the Kursk incursion, you know, some of these other munitions depots going up and things like that. It's made made the war real for people within Russia, and it's instantly resulted in a deterioration of support for this war on the Putin side. So you're right.
Yeah, because they don't hear about the 100,000 plus in body bags, unless if you're related to one of them brought back in a body bag. You don't really know it or see it. You only see Putin's propaganda. Because
as much as they say, or we're told that they have free speech over there, it's not true. No. There's still heavy censorship, and the media
internet
is very
way like China. They're definitely, and Google is even happy to help them control it.
Yeah. So, love my Russian supporting friends, and you know, and even Putin. I mean, he's just doing what Putin thinks he has to do for his country, but I just disagree. There's no justification, none, for what he has done here with this invasion into Ukraine. And people need to understand, and this is not partisan politics. Russia, Putin, is the one escalating here. It's him. He's the one escalating. He's the one threatening nuclear war. And I've got a big frickin' problem with that.
Yeah. And if he really wanted Ukraine to be the breadbasket of the Soviet Empire again, he could have done through peaceful negotiation and lawful legal means and made deals.
Yes. Yep.
He didn't. He invaded.
Yeah. And, stop threatening to blow me up. Okay? Stop threatening to incinerate us.
Yeah, that's
I'm tired
kind of
it.
a red line.
Yeah, that's a red line for me. You threatened to incinerate us. Okay? I've got a problem with that. All right? Because, like, you punch me in the nose, I'm going to nuke you?
Yeah, I punch you in the nose after you've punched me in the nose 10 times, and that's then the escalation. You're going to burn me to a cinder?
Yeah, you're losing me, right? You're losing my
any moral
understanding.
Equivalency is gone.
Yeah.
How does anyone feel there is a moral equivalency between these sides? There isn't. You have to be willfully ignorant of reality.
Could you imagine if Joe Biden came out tomorrow and says, if Putin keeps on doing this, we reserve the right to nuke Russia. We're gonna nuke Russia.
People would be up in arms, including me,
yeah,
about the irresponsibility of it. But Putin does it all day long, and crickets.
Oh, not only that, I hear some people, even within our family, your Maverick family, saying, "I like Putin. He's such a strong leader. He's a good leader. He
is a strong leader.
He is a strong leader because he's always threatening to nuke people. Don't nuke you."
Well, you know what it is, and I hate to say this because, being a Christian, hate the sin, love the sinner, and I have gay and lesbian friends, but a lot of people want to see it through a Christian lens, and he doesn't tolerate the LGBTQ elemental plus minus divide equal crap in his nation. So that's what they cling to. It's, in a way, a homophobia, and again, how much I hate that term, because, of course, I get accused of it all the time. But I think there might be a little of that in there.
Well, I'll just throw it over to you, Joseph, for a final thought tonight as we wrap up this special Maverick News broadcast.
Well, I, with what I just said, if it isn't clear to people yet that I don't just wear one particular partisan hat and I call out any side, all sides, even my own side, when I think it's principles, not personalities. If that isn't clear to people now, I'll never win them over. They're just delusional. Putin atrocity apologist puppets. tinyurl.com, Putin atrocity apologists.
And on that note, folks, we are going to wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for spending the time here tonight with us. It's a privilege, as always, and I appreciate you guys tolerating our points of view. You guys have your points of view, and that's what politics is.
Yeah.
It's,
they
don't always agree.
Right. They have every right to their opinion, but as I say all the time online, you have a right to an opinion, but it matters if it's based on reality or fantasy.
And I will be back tomorrow night, 7 p.m.
Love
Eastern.
you, brother.
Thank you, Joseph, for joining me tonight. Catch everybody tomorrow on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.